It's stories like the one you're about to hear, which is why I have always had a problem with that play that they came out with a couple years ago. I think it was on Broadway called Race Play or Slave Play, something to that effect. Y'all know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. So this man's name, well, first off, I can't even bring myself to call him a man. This thing's name is Roger Golubsky, and he was a Kansas City detective, and he was charged with holding young black girls in sexual captivity. Well, they said sexual slavery, but same difference. Sick ass man. And when I was looking at one of his other pictures, I said, look at that stash. Anybody who has a stash that looks like that, in my eyes, is guilty as hell. But let's go ahead and find out some more information. And I'm reading this story from Black Enterprise. A former Kansas City police officer has been indicted along with 3 other people for conspiring to hold young women in slavery and forcing them into prostitution. According to a press release from the Department of Justice, former Kansas City Police Department Detective Roger Golubsky has been indicted by a federal grand jury in Topeka, Kansas, along with Cecil Brooks, Lamarck Roberson, and Richard Robinson. A federal grand jury in Topeka returned a 3-count indictment against the 4 men, charging them with conspiring to hold young women in a condition of involuntary sexual servitude several decades ago. The 3-count indictment handed down details that all 4 men have been charged with conspiring to hold young women, including person 1 and person 2, in a condition of involuntary servitude. The 2nd count charges Brooks, Roberson, and Robinson with holding person 1 in involuntary servitude and forcing her to provide sexual services to Roberson. And the 3rd count charges Brooks, Roberson, and Golubsky with holding person 2 in involuntary servitude and forcing her to provide sexual services to adult men, including Brooks, Roberson, and Golubsky. The indictment reveals that from 1996 through 1998, Brooks utilized a place at the Delavan Apartments in Kansas City where the young women were held captive. Brooks, Roberson, and Robinson beat, sexually assaulted, and threatened the young women to force them to provide sexual services to men. Former Detective Golubsky is accused of accepting money from Brooks as he provided protection from law enforcement. The protection payments were for criminal activity, including sex trafficking. Golubsky is also accused of forcibly violating the young woman identified as person 2. 2 months ago, Golubsky was charged in a separate indictment with civil rights violations for allegedly acting under color of law to commit aggravated sexual assaults. If convicted, each man will be facing a maximum sentence of life in prison, which they all should just get right off the bat. And the thing is, as I was reading this, I didn't know that this was from years ago. I'm thinking this was more recent, maybe in the last couple of years. This is dating back to the 90s when this was going on. And it sounds like it's from 96 to 98. So it sounds to me like they were doing this for roughly around 2 years. I wonder why it took so long for them to actually not only bring the story to light, but to actually get them. Golubsky, a former veteran homicide detective in Kansas City, along with a local drug kingpin, conspired to collectively run a sex trafficking operation that involved young underage girls. All the young women held against their will were black, according to Law and Crime. CNN reported that Golubsky has entered a plea of not guilty, according to his attorney, Chris Joseph. Roger maintains his innocence and looks forward to clearing his name from these decades-old and uncorroborated allegations, Joseph said in an email to CNN. Well, it looks he can plead not guilty all he wants, but 9 times out of 10, there's something there. That is some wild shit right there. But it doesn't surprise me that it took so long for the story to come to light, because look at who the captives were. Young black girls. Kind of reminds you of what happened with Dirty Dick Danny, right? When he was going around violating those young black women. And then he got to the last one and they believed her. And then when they did the investigation, they found his DNA. And it linked him to all of those women, or at least some of them. And now he's doing that 200+ year bid. I wonder how many more years he has to go. And still to this day, the icing on the cake of that whole case is him being convicted. Well, not convicted, but him being sentenced on his birthday. To this day, that is probably one of the most ultimate aha moments that I have ever seen in my life. Imagine you getting sentenced to 200 plus years in prison on your birthday. That still sends, you know, puts a smile on my face. Too bad I wasn't making videos back then. That would have been the ultimate triple P. But back to this guy right here. Now, the story is saying that there were more men involved. It wasn't just him. So I'm going to see if I can find the image of these other individuals, because they did give their names. Well, unfortunately, I couldn't find the pictures of the other two men or the other men that were involved. But what I found to be even more interesting about this Roger Golubski guy is that he has a very long, lengthy track record of doing some very corrupt, shady, illegal things outside of what I just talked about. Here I am thinking I'm just going to talk about that. But this guy has his hands in so many things that it is not even funny how corrupt this one guy is. And I'm going to go over some of them right now. The first one being this one right here. So as you know, that's the creep on the right. But on the left is a man, excuse me about that. The one on the left is a man by the name of Lamont McIntyre. And back in 1994, when he was only 17 years old, he was arrested for a double homicide in which he didn't commit. I'm going to read a little bit of it. It says in 1994, Kansas City, Kansas police arrested Lamont McIntyre for a double homicide he didn't commit, sending him to prison for more than 2 decades before he was finally exonerated. Except McIntyre was a huge mile away from those Hutching Street murders. As it turns out, the only evidence police had to charge McIntyre was with his first name and the coerced testimony of 2 witnesses. I would not be surprised if the 2 witnesses were coerced by Roger Golubski. Now also look at this headline right here. Feds investigating retired Kansas cop accused of decades of malfeasance, including preying on vulnerable black women and framing the son of a woman who rejected him. This is all coming from the same guy. And by the way, this headline that you're looking at is from an article dated October 22nd, 2021. Let's keep it moving. Now, this is just a picture that I found on another article that was dated September 20th, 2022. It says, after former Kansas City, Kansas detective is arrested, questions about other cases remain. And I guess this is another one of the people that got caught up in his web of corruption. And if you notice, every person that has a complaint about this guy, they happen to be black. Notice that black men is a lot of black men that constantly got arrested and thrown in jail under his watch, and a lot of black women were assaulted under his watch. So this guy has a fetish with black people as a collective, but on 2 different spectrums depending on the gender. Now, what I was reading in the article for this one is they said that when the inmates found out that this man had got arrested, they said they started cheering loudly like they were watching the Super Bowl and their team won. So that just tells you right there that this guy was super corrupted. And all those inmates, for the most part, are aware of him or probably had run-ins with him and probably got locked up because of him. But because of everything that, you know, that's come out about him, and now a lot of people are saying we all need to go back and reinvestigate all of these cases that he was a part of, especially since what just recently came out about him, in which I read in the beginning of this video. Because I didn't intend to go down the rabbit hole with this one. I was only thinking I was going to discuss that first topic, but it led me to this. So this guy has decades of corruption on his side. He literally was is a one-man wrecking crew. All the stuff that this man did seemingly by himself, and he probably has some help, but seemingly by himself, you would think that a whole department was behind this. This guy just didn't know when to quit. But this lets me know without the shadow of a doubt, he's definitely anti-black. That's for damn sure. He has some kind of personal vendetta against black people. I have no clue how to classify it, but there it is, in plain sight. But yeah, like, that's crazy. And I need to ask my subscribers, any of my subscribers who lives in Kansas City or around that area, were you or are you familiar with this Roger Golubski person? And if you are, please give me some additional information down in the chat or even in the comments section about this guy and his extremely corrupt ways.